So I'm very happy to introduce you to Lucy Lyons, a CEO and co-founder at Kestrix, which she calls it the Google Maps of heat loss, if I'm correct. And she is an Oxford graduate, and also she was listed 30 under 30 in the Forbes list. And yeah, I'm super happy that she's here with us. And we're going to delve more into her insight in green entrepreneurship. So Lucy, if you could start off just by talking about what Kestrix does in more detail.
Yeah, thanks, Dominica, for the really kind introduction. So to give just a bit of background on Kestrix, Kestrix is a climate tech and prop tech startup on a mission to unlock energy retrofits of existing buildings at speed and at scale. So how do we do this? Essentially, we commission thermal drone flights over whole areas of the built environment at a time. And then we are building out AI that essentially maps how heat leaks from buildings, both qualitatively and quantitatively, puts that into 3D, and then generates a roadmap of energy efficiency changes to make that building more energy efficient. So you can think of us sort of as the data layer powering the built environment's climate transition, or the third-party verification layer for energy efficient buildings.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the problem that you're solving is basically, well, heat leakages and just optimizing things. That makes sense. So what kind of sparked your idea to found Kestrix?
So I've always been in and around entrepreneurship. So my dad is actually a restaurateur. So from a young age, I was always thinking about whether customers were happy and whether the cost base made sense, just because my dad would ask me, these questions when I walked into a restaurant as a kid. I never thought, though, that I would be a business owner. I was always really into sort of human rights, environmental activism, social justice, all of those things. Thought maybe I would be a journalist. I really love storytelling. So went to university and studied politics and urban design and some languages. But it wasn't until I decided I wanted to become business level proficient in German that I moved back to Germany. And the only job that I could find that would take a non-native speaker was at a startup. And I didn't know it at the time, but Berlin was an early hub for climate tech and climate startups. So I sort of fell into that world. And yeah, basically found myself working at a carbon accounting company called Plan A. So at the time I joined, it was only, I think, under 10 people. I worked very closely with the CEO there and really, witnessed the boom of carbon accounting companies caring about ESG, counting their carbon emissions and trying to figure out how to decarbonize. So it was really there when I came into contact for the first time with organizations who were saying, gosh, we have a bunch of assets and we have no idea how to understand their impact on the environment and figure out how to make them better. And a company like Plan A has a whole suite of solutions for different industries. But it became clear when I was there that you could get even more specific when it came to, essentially specific supply chain, specific verticals. So having minored in urban planning, I always had an interest in the built environment. So when I started in the Carbon 13 venture builder and met my co-founder, Matt, and he showed me a 3D heat loss map of a home, sort of a light bulb went off in my head thinking, gosh, this is the highly technical, non-invasive data layer for making the largest asset class in the world low carbon. So that's sort of my why around Kestrix. To go back to my co-founder, it was his brilliant idea to do this. He's a longtime drone hobbyist and also grew up with his parents renovating homes around him. So when he went to retrofit his own home, thinking of his kids and the fact that he has to do something, small little part to help decarbonization efforts, he couldn't figure out for the life of him what the first best thing to do to make his home more energy efficient was. So he thought, gosh, I'll just fly my drone and figure out where the heat loss is happening. So it was sort of him thinking, this solves my problem. And I came in and saw that it solved a systemic business problem. And that's really sort of how it happened.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I really love the drone story of your co-founder.
Yeah.
So when you got together with him and kind of founded Kestrix, how did you kind of go on with developing the team further? How did you consider maybe other interdisciplinary skills and diversity and inclusion in building out the team?
So it became really clear at the beginning that we didn't need to build a drone company. There are a lot of those actually that exist that would capture the images. What we really needed to build was the analytics layer to pull insights out of images about how buildings are losing heat. So very quickly, we realized that was a problem at the edge of, machine learning, computer vision, and radiation physics. So it was a very sort of specific skill set that we needed, technical skill set, to make this vision a reality. Luckily, Matt himself has background at the intersection of physics and computer science, engineering, computer science. So he was, really well positioned to write the original grant application that funded the beginnings of our early algorithms. But yeah, we had to hire a team pretty quickly after we raised. So the original core team that we hired last September, so about a year ago, which was amazing, consisted of 4 additional people. So we had 3 engineers, one sort of a keep the lights on, head of architecture type, Ash. He's really, really great. The other 2 were machine learning engineers. Ishmael had come from an aerospace background, and done a lot with 3D reconstruction, having worked prior at another drone adjacent company. And Amber has a really interesting sort of Swiss Army knife background. She actually studied international development, and became sort of self-taught software engineer, product manager, and then more recently did a boot camp on machine learning. So Amber joined as our 3rd engineer. And then we had Valerie on the operations side. So she's my founder's associate, but deals a lot with sort of coordinating drone flights. Putting drones over 2,000 buildings is often really complicated. So she helped with that, as well as collecting the ground truth data for our algorithmic training, which required us putting a bunch of sensors inside buildings all over London. So yeah, that was really brilliant. We were really happy to have a 50-50 gender split right from the beginning. That was always important to us. I think it's easier when you're a founding team that looks a bit gender diverse to attract women in the early stages. It's interesting though, because I don't think actually we biased for hiring women. I think we just had female candidates in our pipeline, which is part luck, but also part, intention. I think we tried to post on diverse, in diverse channels, mentioned to recruiters that, although actually neither Val or Amber came that route, but yeah, it was something we were really proud of. But I wouldn't say we engineered it into our process, but it is sort of it has a bit of a flywheel effect. Like at one point we were more women than men. And yeah, now I think we're about even again. But I think it's when someone sees a picture of your team and it looks diverse, it's naturally more diverse applicants. So actually those first few hires are really critical. And like looking back, I would have even indexed on it more. We were lucky we didn't have to. Obviously though, Matt and I are, we're gender diverse, but we're not diverse in any other ways. Like we're, both white from, privileged socioeconomic backgrounds relatively. And I think, so we made an effort to try and incorporate people from different racial, religious backgrounds as well. And the team actually is quite diverse in that regard too, at the moment. What I will say though, is that especially when you're a small startup, your priority is on hiring the best person available who can deliver on the roadmap you have in front of you, which sometimes means like hiring someone 1 month late can be the thing that puts a project at risk. So we've been really lucky to attract diverse candidates, and we've definitely made an effort to have them in the pipeline. But I think, it's difficult to put the burden on startups to solve systemic, inequalities.
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
for sure.
And I think it's the job of the whole ecosystem, right? Like it's VCs as well. It's, but again, it starts with the founders and the early team. Like if you only fund all male teams, they're less likely to attract female applicants, and then those applicants are less likely to get hired. And it's, sort of a vicious cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of, I know that this is kind of a question that women or otherwise marginalized people don't like to get because it's kind of so repetitive and everything. But what has been your experience as a female founder? I know we also had like a different startup before, and so you've been around for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard to know, right? Because I've never been a male founder. So maybe there are ways I've been treated that make me different from other people. I think overall it's been good though. I think I'm lucky that like some really amazing women have paved the way for me and others who are my contemporaries. Like I think even 5 years ago, it was so much harder to get funded as a woman, to be taken seriously as a woman. I also think that I have the privilege of having a male co-founder. So there is a bit of this sense of like, yeah, VCs maybe want to have their diversity box checked, and I help with that, but I'm not that risky because at least there's a man in the room. Not to say that someone's ever said that to me, but sometimes I wonder. Like, I think if my co-founder were female, it would be a lot harder for me to fundraise. And the statistics back that up. I think a lot of people talk about the 2% of VC funding going to female founders, but what people don't talk about a lot is that's actually to female only companies. So actually many more companies with a female co-founder do get funded. So I think that's like 19%. So I'm in the 19% category. Whereas if I had a female co-founder, I'd be in the 2% category. So I actually think that we should be differentiating between those two. But yeah, I also think like sometimes it gets wrapped up in my age. Like I'm younger than the average founder, especially the average female founder. And I often wonder like whether, there have been times when I've been rejected from a VC because they've said that I don't have enough experience on my CV or I don't have enough continuity. Yeah, and I just wonder whether they'd say the same thing to a man, but I'll never know, So I'm definitely not out here saying that I'm super disadvantaged. I think the other thing to consider is, right, like I'm female, but I'm privileged in every other way. So like if I were a person of color, how would that change? Like if I were a trans person, how would that change? It's hard to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Another thing that I would like to touch up on is maybe some kind of a challenge or a failure that you've had in the past and kind of how you've overcome that or you've learned from that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, my first ever startup failed. I don't talk about it that much. It was I started it when I was 22, worked on it for about a year and a half. And yeah, we managed to secure some angel backing, which sort of supported me through that year, which was amazing. But it didn't end up going through. And I think the biggest learning for me actually was learning when to throw the towel in, right? So I think for a long time when I was working on that, I knew that it wasn't going to work, but I was really afraid of stepping away from it because of all that I'd put into it, because of all the people around me who were cheering for me. And there were a lot of reasons it wasn't going to work. Like I won't go into the details of what it was, but it was operationally complicated. Like I was not experienced at all. I didn't have a co-founder. I wasn't, the person working with me and funding with me didn't really want me to have co-founders. So that also made it difficult to fill the skills gaps. There were just a lot of things that said that it probably wasn't going to work out. So I think my learning from that is be honest with yourself. Like if it's not working out, like look at the data and listen to the data, which is hard to balance, right? Because on the other hand, everyone says like, oh, startups are so hard, just keep grinding, keep trying. But yeah, I think my biggest learning was like, look at the data. Your time is really valuable. So yeah, hopefully that instills some confidence in Kestrix, because I'm definitely here because I think we've got something great. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks again so much for sharing this story. Um, I would have another question, but that this one is more about the future and the future of green entrepreneurship in general. Kind of what do you see for this area in the coming years?
I definitely see a lot of, I don't know if it's consolidation as much as focus. I think in the past, anything that had the words sustainability, ESG, carbon on it was considered like a sustainable startup and a worthwhile endeavor. I think we're starting to get a lot more focused about the problems that need to be solved. And within that, not just like the systemic problems, but like the willingness to pay. And yeah, what sort of business models, what sort of problem areas have like a natural willingness to pay from a customer. I think that means there's going to be fewer companies that get funded, but higher quality ones, hopefully. I think we're already seeing a massive focus on hard to abate sectors. I think that's going to continue. And I think hardware is going to just get sexier and sexier. I think that some software companies will persist, but I think we'll continue to understand that software won't save the world. That said, I do think software and AI still create efficiency, and efficiency creates cost savings, and cost savings create value. So I do think startups that leverage AI to create efficiencies will continue to prosper. And that's exactly the category that Kestrix falls into, right? Like we aspire to reduce the cost of an energy survey to a fraction of what it currently is. And if you consider energy surveys necessary, then there's no way that that there won't be a market for it. Of course, there's operational and technical constraints, but that's sort of the idea. And I think, so yeah, I think just throwing AI out there isn't going to do much, but startups that can prove that they're solving a problem will still persist. I think though, the last thing I'll mention is the regulatory environment. Like there are market failures that make it that it doesn't always make sense to retrofit, for example. I mean, like the underlying assumption that we have at Kestrix is retrofit will happen. You know, if the whole world falls far right and like there's populism and nobody cares about the environment, then we're going to have a problem, right? So I think that it is like heavily reliant on political outcomes, which means that everyone funding startups and startup founders need to get political, in my opinion. They're in the climate, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's impact entrepreneurship, so yeah, very closely interconnected for sure. Okay, to kind of wrap things slowly up, I would like to ask if you maybe have any advice for starting entrepreneurs.
Ooh, I'd say my biggest piece of advice is to not forget about your friends and family. And like, there's always more things that can be done for the company, but like you will fall apart if you don't hang out with your friends and family. For some people, that's exercise and healthy eating. That should also be a priority. But you know, at the end of the day, it might not work out too. So you don't want to look back on several years of your life and feel like you threw it all away. And it'll make you better for it. So I think just like not romanticizing like crazy hours and stuff is really important.